Hi, everybody. This is SAAD. I recently reached out to a gentleman by the name of Sid Ziegler. I think I had seen him on Tucker Carlson, if memory serves me right, or one of the high-profile shows, wherein he was arguing that there is no proof that transgendered athletes have any competitive advantage in athletics, and that the science was clearly on his side. And so I wrote to him first publicly, and then we exchanged privately when he followed me, albeit briefly. I wrote to him saying, do you think that there are no evolved sex differences between the two sexes when it comes to physiological, morphological, anatomical, and hormonal differences? Which, of course, he didn't answer. And then when we communicated privately, I wanted to get a sense whether we were going to have a conversation that was rooted in logic and reasons and science. And so one of the first things I did was to ask him what he thought of a tweet that had come out of Pink News, where they said, I'm going to quote, "Trans women are women, so trans women's bodies are women's bodies, so trans women's penises are women's penises." This is exactly in line with my prophetic satire. And so I asked him what he thought of this. He got upset by that. And then I again reiterated that my goal is to have a honest conversation, but I wanted to gauge whether he is parasitized by ideology or whether there was an intersection in our Venn diagrams of reality so that we can have a conversation. A day or two later, I tweeted to him a recent athletic outcome, where two trans women had won, I think, a high school running sprint competition. I think it was sprint in Connecticut, I believe. And so I said, I look forward to hearing from Sid Ziegler what he thinks of this. To which then his gloves came off. He said, I'm glad that I didn't engage with yours truly. It would have been useless. And then he goes on to say that I'm just a culture warrior masquerading as a scientist, and on and on. And, I'm a transphobe and so on. Of course, once you come at me in this manner, I'm not the right guy to do this with. So for the past 2 days, I've been smacking him all the way to Unicornia, where he lives, and back. But my point in going after this guy is not so much that he matters. It's that what he represents is actually something profoundly important and dangerous. Number one, he rejects common sense. He rejects reality. He rejects science. He rejects what the average 2-year-old knows when they begin to categorize the world in male and female. He rejects it because his ideology requires him to reject it. So you either reject the notion that there are anatomical, physiological, morphological, and hormonal differences between the sexes, or if you don't reject them, then you're a transphobe, which apparently I am. Now imagine this gentleman is trying to attack me on my scientific credibility. As I've explained, the length of my CV, my scientific CV, is longer than the totality of what he's read in his life. In other words, it would take longer for him to get through my CV than what he's read since he was 5 years old. Yet he feels perfectly comfortable in attacking me, as a fake scientist. And of course, tons of people have gone after him because he exactly represents what's wrong in today's public discourse. Feelings trump facts. Hurt feelings and offense and outrage supersede the building of nomological networks of cumulative evidence. You don't need to be a fancy evolutionary psychologist to build a nomological network of cumulative evidence regarding sex differences between men and women that have very clear downstream effects in terms of competitive advantage in athletic competitions. Do we really have to have that conversation in the 21st century? Apparently we do, when you are parasitized by idea pathogens, which of course, as you know, is the topic of my next book. Now let me move on very quickly to something else that is common amongst the perpetually offended, the social justice warriors, and that is that when they can't identify anyone in the outgroup to attack and devour, then they turn on themselves. This is what I call the orgiastic self-cannibalism. So Rami Malek recently won the Oscar for Best Actor for portraying Freddie Mercury, the lead singer of Queen. And at first, apparently, people were very upset at him because he didn't mention the fact that, Freddie Mercury's sexuality, and people were outraged that they would erase Mercury's, sexuality when talking about him having played him in the movie. So then later, apparently in the Oscars, I didn't watch the Oscars, but I will share the article that describes this nonsense. Later, he, when he was accepting, I guess, his Oscar, he did mention that Freddie Mercury, here I am, I played the, an immigrant, a gay man, whatever, I don't remember the exact words, and people were disgusted, outraged that he would call Freddie Mercury a gay man, and in doing so erase his queer, element of a facet of his personhood, and the fact that he was bisexual. And so this transphobe Rami Malek was erasing Mercury's bisexuality by referring to him as a gay man. So when he didn't refer to his sexuality, he was a bigot. When he referred to his sexuality, he was a bigot. All roads lead to bigotry, as I explained through numerous examples in my forthcoming book. So I decided to help Rami Malek out. He's from the Middle East originally. I think his parents are maybe Coptic Christians, if I'm not mistaken, from Egypt. So here's what I wrote. I wrote a tweet earlier today. Upcoming attacks against Rami Malek from noble social justice warriors. Number 1, why didn't Rami condemn Israel in his acceptance speech? Number 2, why didn't Rami speak about climate change in his acceptance speech? Number 3, why didn't Rami insult Donald Trump in his acceptance speech? Number 4, why didn't Rami proclaim that he is willing to mate both with women with vaginas as well as women with 9-inch penises in his acceptance speech? Number 5, why didn't Rami directly compliment Professor Dr. Occasional Cortex in his acceptance speech? Number 6, why didn't Rami reject toxic masculinity in his acceptance speech? Number 7, why didn't Rami reiterate the existence of 873 genders in his acceptance speech? Did I miss anything? Slowly we inch, slowly we inch. Don't sit idly. Don't just send me letters telling me how much you appreciate my work, although I do appreciate your wonderful words. Get engaged. You have a voice. You stand up to the lunacy. When you hear your friends on Facebook saying nonsense, confront them. Your professor says nonsense, confront them. You're sitting by the water cooler at work and someone says something you disagree with, don't walk away and cower. Confront them. And when I say confront them, it doesn't have to be filled with animus, but speak your mind. It's only when you challenge people's beliefs that they stand the chance of revising them. If you sit quietly and allow them to build the echo chambers, then how do you expect them to change their opinions? Have a good day, everybody.